Well, we've been talking this morning already to Penny Mordaunt and to Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, and we hope to be able to talk to Peter Mandelson and Naomi Long in a moment. But just to remind you, Penny Mordaunt and I talked at some length about the news emerging from the talks between the Prime Minister and the parties in Northern Ireland and the EU, which appear, I only say appear, to be heading towards some conclusion. And here's what the Leader of the House of Commons had to say.
There are encouraging signs, but the Prime Minister has said that there is still hard work to be done, and everyone will be pulling together to ensure that we're giving that deal the best chance possible. What matters here, and the Prime Minister is very focused on this, is what the people of Northern Ireland think about this deal. This has to be acceptable to all communities in Northern Ireland, and the EU is aware of that. So I wish them well. I think it would be great if we can arrive at that point. But that's the test. It's not what I or any other member of the Commons thinks. It's the people of Northern Ireland.
Well, let's now speak to a man who knows a thing or two about trying to strike deals between the parties in Northern Ireland and in Brussels. I'm joined now by the former Northern Ireland Secretary and EU Trade Commissioner, Peter, now Lord Mandelson. Good morning, Lord Mandelson.
Good morning.
Now, as Northern Ireland Secretary, you were responsible for implementing the Good Friday Agreement. Do you think, though we don't know the details of it, but what we understand of the rumoured deal, do you think that that endangers that agreement in any way?
If we get a deal over the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is an essential part of our overall deal with the European Union post-Brexit, it will do more than anything else to support the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. It will reinforce the peace process and help stop any return to the violence that we've seen in Northern Ireland in previous decades. So I'm hoping very much indeed that the UK government and the EU have now found a landing zone for revising how the original Northern Ireland Protocol was operating. I think that's an important thing to achieve, and I hope very much that they're going to be successful.
You, in fact, did describe the protocol as, I think your words were, not perfect. Does that mean that you think that it was inadequate as a basis for agreement, or simply needed essentially some updating, some tweaking? What is the... Is it an obstacle, or is it really something that we should invest in?
It was an essential thing to put in place, but the way in which it was done was not satisfactory, and the way it's operated since has not been satisfactory. I mean, Boris Johnson imposed it without consultation with unionists and others in Northern Ireland in the first place. He then set about repudiating it, having told lies about it to unionists in Northern Ireland, and in the process wrecked our partnership with the Republic of Ireland, and did so much to destroy trust between Britain and the European Union. So I hope he's not going to come in and start wrecking everything all over again. A period of silence on his part, I think, would now be welcome. But here's the point, Trevor. Although the protocol itself is an essential part of the overall post-Brexit deal, it creates special trading relations for Northern Ireland, which avoid a hard border being reimposed between North and South Ireland. In my view, the European Union frankly approached its implementation in a rather clunky way. I mean, over-literal, overly strict. And I'm glad that the European Union now has decided to step back, reconsider, and approach things in a rather more flexible way. That's what's needed now.
I want to ask you about what they might be thinking about in Brussels in a moment, but if we may, can I just ask you about the DUP and also about Mr Johnson's intervention this morning? He seems to be saying that we should retain the protocol bill as an option, if you like, a threat to the EU. Penny Mordaunt described his intervention this morning as helpful on the ground that it would remind the EU, I guess, that this doesn't have to happen and that they perhaps need to make more concessions. What do you make of that?
There's nothing that Boris Johnson is doing now, or indeed throughout our recent history with the European Union, that could possibly be described as helpful. He's wrecking. He's trying to wreck the thing because he's opposed to the Prime Minister. He and his supporters want to undermine the Prime Minister. It's just a sort of continuation of the fratricidal war that we see in the Conservative Party. So I really hope that Boris Johnson removes himself entirely from this matter. You know, we don't need him wrecking things anymore. Look, the point is this, that in my view, insufficient attention, concern was shown by all parties, the EU and the British government, towards unionist and other sensitivities in Northern Ireland, and they're repairing that, and that's a good thing to be doing. But it will also enable us, if we get this agreement in place, to repair our relationship between Britain and the Republic of Ireland, which is so important in continuing to uphold the Belfast Good Friday Agreement in the peace process, but also to rebuild trust and to reconnect Britain with the European Union, not to go back into the European Union, of course, but to get a sensible working relationship between us.
You probably understand the, if I can put it this way, political psychology of Brussels and of Belfast better than anyone else, because you've had to deal with both cities from the inside. The DUP says in one of its 7 tests that it can't accept anything that involves, if you like, a democratic deficit, i.e. EU institutions, including the ECJ, having a role in determining certain kinds of policies. The EU wants any kind of disputes to be settled, at least in part, with the involvement of the ECJ. Is it conceivable that those two mindsets can be brought together?
Yes, it is possible, and it's very important that happens. Look, the arrangements are that Northern Ireland, in a sense, is being given a very privileged position to take advantage both of the UK-wide market and economy, but also the opportunities that are offered by a special association with Europe's single market. That's going to be very important, by the way, for Northern Ireland's economic future. There are real advantages, real opportunities now available to Northern Ireland, and I'd like to, see those properly realised. But I would just make 2 points about this. Whilst the rules of the single market will apply, however flexibly and wisely, there will be occasions when some arbitration is needed, and that's why the role of the European Court comes into play. But I hope that the court and its role will be downplayed. I hope the European Court takes a very clear back seat in the operation of these arrangements. But secondly, and I said this to former colleagues of mine in the European Commission before Christmas, it would be a very good idea if the European Union, in its approach to Northern Ireland, consults not just the unionists, but all the parties, the Northern Ireland Assembly as a whole, in how it goes about operating these arrangements. And if they've got to be adjusted or changed in the future, then consult people, talk to people. And I think the European Union are now mindful of the need to do that, and I very much hope they'll do so in the future.
Can I talk to you about the other big political development, or another big political development of the week, and that is the announced resignation of Scotland's First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon. So, it's goodbye, Nicola. Good news for Labour?
I think it is good news for Labour, but you know, what's more important for Labour and its electoral prospects is not what happens to Nicola Sturgeon, but how the changes that have been brought about in the Labour Party by Keir Starmer's leadership are embraced by the UK electorate as a whole. The changes in the Labour Party are much more important to our electoral prospects than what's going on in the SNP. But of course it opens up an opportunity for us in Scotland. We badly need to win back seats. We've got a superb leader of Scottish Labour, Anna Sawa, who works very, very closely with Keir Starmer. And I think that the opportunity now is for Labour not to offer a different version of nationalism to the Scottish people, but an alternative to nationalism. What the Labour Party will do for the Scottish economy and jobs and skills, the health service and healthcare delivery, transport, education, fighting crime.
Yes.
These are the big issues now on which the next election is going to be fought.
I want to come to one of those big issues in a moment, but just very quickly on the politics of this. You talked about the changes in Labour. The Equality and Human Rights Commission this week said that Labour was, in effect, out of special measures on the question of anti-Semitism. And the leader has said that Jeremy Corbyn will not be a Labour candidate. Now, there's some question about whether he can actually guarantee that. But is that the right decision, or is it just a provocation?
Yes, it is the right decision. Look, it's also inevitable. I mean, Jeremy Corbyn, who played such a part and was so instrumental in tolerating anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, so much a part of the problem, it has chosen himself not to be part of the solution. And therefore, I think his withdrawal is inevitable.
One very last brief question, if I may. Labour Party today is talking about a new regime on the antisocial behaviour, cracking down on people who are repeatedly disrupting town centres and so on. It struck me reading their release, there was quite an echo of something that was said during your time in government, to be tough on crime. I look back to see Jack Straw's comments about getting winos and squeegee merchants off the street. Not so much back to the future, but maybe back to New Labour.
Now, I think what's important is that the current leadership and shadow cabinet, front bench of the Labour Party, look at all that we did as a government, learn all the lessons, and then seeing the new challenges that the country faces, some of which are similar, some of which are new. You know, take what we did forward, adapt it, build on it. I mean, apply it to the second decade of the 21st century. I mean, nobody wants to sort of turn the clock back. But I think that, you know, what you're seeing in the Labour Party leadership now, you know, is a lot of sense, a lot of practicality. Keir Starmer's made it absolutely clear that he wants to fight the next election on the centre ground of British politics.
Okay.
And I think that, you know, strong, modern centre-left policies are what are required by the country now. Now, equally, there's a fringe in the Labour Party that wants to contest that. My view is that the Labour Party can't make two offers at the next election. It has to be a Starmer offer and not a sort of Corbyn-tinged offer.
Okay.
And I think if those people in the Labour Party can't get behind Starmer, then they should be the ones who step back.
Lord Mandelson, thank you so much for your time this morning.
Pleasure.